Anna Seewolf, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. I'm a parent educator, and my mission is to help children by helping parents. The motto of this podcast is raising our children, growing ourselves. Today, how to feel great. Simple and easy steps to eat better, sleep well, move more, and ultimately live longer. I am so thrilled to bring this episode to you as I am talking with someone I truly admire. This is such a rich and wide-ranging conversation that it's hard to come up with a succinct title for the episode. In addition to discussing my guest's latest book, Feel Great, Lose Weight, Simple Habits for Lasting and Sustainable Weight Loss, we also reflect on the global pandemic. We recorded this conversation in February as the 1-year anniversary of the pandemic was approaching. We covered a variety of topics: mental health, parenting, relationships, virtual learning, loneliness, touch, human connections, and so much more. Back in March of 2020, when we went into lockdown, who knew it would last this long? 1 year has passed. Unbelievable. A lot has changed in our lives. We work, learn, socialize, and function in ways that were not familiar for many of us, remotely, from home. Many people, on top of dealing with real losses, also experience what experts call ambiguous loss, the loss of our normal life, the more intangible and invisible parts with no clear end or closure. It's the ambiguous nature that makes it a challenging and confusing type of grief. It's been a year defined by change, loss, and grief. For me personally, the last year has brought up a lot. Old coping patterns, reactivation of traumatic memories. I was pushed to my limits and drained out of my inner resources. Every aspect of our lives has been limited and compromised. We have adapted to so many restrictions and tried to retain shreds of normalcy. How are you feeling at this stage of the pandemic? Take some time to reflect on your year. It's been a historic year after all. In what ways have you been challenged? How has life changed for you and your family members? What did you learn about yourself? In what ways have you grown? What are you looking forward to? What 3 positive things have come out of this situation for you? What are you doing now that you want to keep doing? What strategies did you use to cope? What do you hope society will take away from our universal experience of the pandemic? In February, I wrote an article called, "Is the Pandemic Taking a Toll on Teens' Mental Health?" It's a topic I feel strongly about. In it, I wrote about the many challenges parents, children, and families face. I hope you will read it and find it helpful. Please see the show notes for the link. So who is my guest? Dr. Rangan Chatterjee. He's regarded as one of the most influential doctors in the UK and wants to change how medicine will be practiced for years to come. His mission is to help 100 million people around the globe live better lives. He hosts the most listened to health podcast in the UK and Europe called Feel Better, Live More. He has authored 4 books, and each of his 4 books have been Sunday Times bestsellers, including his latest Feel Great, Lose Weight, which is published in the United States and Canada, March 30th, 2021. Dr. Chatterjee hosts his own wellness show in BBC Radio 2 and regularly appears on BBC News and television, and has been featured in numerous international publications, including the New York Times, Forbes, The Guardian, and Vogue, and his TEDx talk, How to Make Disease Disappear, has been viewed over 3 million times. I love his holistic approach to health and the way he empowers people to become the architects of their own health through cultivating better, lasting habits and making simple lifestyle changes for feeling great. I love his positive, compassionate nature and enthusiasm for helping people. Please enjoy this wide-ranging, thought-provoking, and deep conversation with Rangan Chatterjee. Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, welcome to the podcast. I should start by welcoming you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to be on your show. It's really kind of you to invite me. Thanks.
My first question for you is, in what ways have you been challenged during this pandemic? How have you coped with the pandemic? What has your experience been with the pandemic?
Yeah, look, I think like pretty much everyone I know and have spoken to, the last 12 months have been incredibly challenging in so many ways. But, you know, with every challenge, there's an opportunity, isn't there? There's an opportunity to learn something, post-traumatic growth, as it were. And, you know, for me, it's been mixed. I remember when in March 2020, when this was sort of kicking off, certainly here in the UK, when restrictions started to come into place. You know, when it first started, my mother, my elderly mother who lives nearby, she had a fall in the night and she was there for a few hours. I went round. When I found out, I tried to help her up. And at that time, we didn't really know what was happening. And the last thing I wanted was my mum to go into hospital. So I ended up sleeping on mum's floor for 3 or 4 nights to, you know, look after her and make sure that she could stay at home. And, you know, I remember that. I have not really reflected on that, but that was the start of all of this. And, you know, looking after mum throughout this time has brought about with it some challenges. You know, it's been hard for mum to have carers come and help her, and her physio and her occupational therapist stopped coming for a period of time. And I think there's all kinds of problems that have arisen on the back of this that maybe aren't being spoken about enough. On a personal level, a lot of my patients were struggling more with anxiety, stress. I saw a lot of mental health problems, which, you know, was really quite concerning because humans are fundamentally, we are social animals. We are designed and wired to be with each other. And that is obviously something that's been taken away from us over the past few months and coming up to 12 months now. But you know what? Like many people, I'm very lucky I got the opportunity to grow in a big way. So I will first say that I am in a lucky position because I could do a lot of my work, whether it's clinical work, whether it's my podcast, whether it's writing books, whatever it is that I do, I could do most of it. And so financially, I wasn't under threat. And I know many people were. So I just want to be sensitive to that because I know many people have been really worried about their jobs and their businesses. I got to spend a lot more time with my wife and kids. And the truth is, it was fantastic. And all travel stopped. So I was having 2 or 3 meals a day with my wife and my children. When the first lockdown kicked in the UK in March and April of 2020, the weather was so good, right? It was as if we got really, really lucky. So, you know what? That was a pretty special time. And as I say, I say that not to be insensitive to people who are going through something else, but my experience is my experience. That is real to me. And that's what happened. And I really feel that the last 12 months for me personally has been personal growth on steroids. Right? I feel I've grown so much. I've learned about myself. I think many of us have. We don't have our usual methods of distraction are not available to us, depending on where we live in the world and what restrictions we're living under. We can't just nip to the coffee shop and, get a bit of a break from what we're doing. We can't just hang out with some friends or do the sort of things that we might have done when bored and feeling pain. So I really feel on a personal level, I've learned a lot about myself. And I think it has been challenging. On a personal level, I feel that I know myself more now than I did 12 months ago. And for that, I'm truly thankful.
So what is one surprising thing you've learned about yourself?
I've learned, what's one surprising thing? I guess, one thing I've reflected on is that I don't need to go on holiday 2 or 3 times a year to escape and relax. I can have a holiday right here. I think there's been a temptation to think, oh yeah, we'll work hard and work hard, we'll work hard. And then we'll get that week where we jump on a plane, if we're lucky enough to do so, go somewhere, relax. But when that was taken away from me, I realized, well, hold on a minute. I don't need to run away from my life to feel like that. I can build that in to my day-to-day life. And I feel that there is such beauty. I live in the northwest of England. And there's a temptation to think here that, you need to fly to Europe or you need to go somewhere exotic to go and get the weather and the scenery. And of course, that's really nice. But you know what? There's some pretty awesome scenery around here. And I think many of us, not just me, have discovered that actually, near our house, in our own neighborhoods, there's real beauty. There's walks that I'd never been on. There's cycle paths that I hadn't discovered. And I think without this period of lockdown and these restrictions, I may never have discovered that. So I think that's one thing I've learned, that there's a lot of beauty around here and I don't need to go on holiday to access it.
How have things been with remote learning? I know your children are 10 and 7. Is that right?
Yeah, 10 and 8 now. And I've got a 10-year-old boy. I've got an 8-year-old daughter. And it's been challenging. There's no question. Look, I'm someone who is very vocal that I think technology is creeping into our lives in all kinds of ways that we hadn't planned for, we hadn't anticipated. I don't think many of us are using technology intentionally. I think what's happening is that we're actually, we're getting these devices, whether it's a smartphone, whatever it is, and, we've got all these apps available to us and we're using everything. We're not thinking about, well, what do I need in my life? How can technology help me? How can technology serve me? And so the background is I've never been a huge fan of how rapidly technology is permeating into all aspects of our life. Of course, I'm not saying it's all bad. I think there's pros and there's cons. And with respect to children, with respect to home learning, there has been this narrative that, we need to get the kids online and they can continue their learning. And I understand that. But I don't think kids, particularly at the age of 10 and 8, really should, I shouldn't say should, I don't feel it's the best thing for them to be on a screen from 9 in the morning or 8:30 in the morning till 3 p.m. I really don't. I think I understand why we moved to that. And I understand schools are trying to adapt quickly to an ever-changing environment that they hadn't planned for. So I'm not criticizing anyone, but I'm just observing that I was finding myself saying to my kids, listen, if you don't want to do the class, it's completely fine. Go in the garden and play, right? I found myself just really not that concerned about their schoolwork at all. I thought, you know what, at your age, I don't think anything's that essential. I think playing together, being out in the garden, running around is much more important than keeping up to date with your classes. Again, I appreciate not everyone has the same view. But I think there have been some good things, definitely, I think they enjoy these kind of Google Classrooms and interacting with their friends, which they're unable to do now in a way that they used to. But yeah, I don't like it. I really don't like it, if I'm honest. In fact, my kids did not have any technology until this pandemic, and their school decided to do online learning. And so I reluctantly got them to laptops to be able to do that. So now we have been really strict around when it can be used, what it is to be used for. But I certainly wasn't anticipating that happening for a few years. But like everyone, you know what? You've got to adapt to what's going on in the world. So I think there's benefits, but I think there's also negatives. And I think we have to be really, really careful how we're educating our children and really valuing what's important. I really, really think that in times like this, education, yes, it plays a role, but we don't have to keep up to date with everything like we were doing at school. I think there's too much pressure on kids. Kids are probably absorbing a lot of their parents' pressures at the moment, right? If the parents are stressed out with work pressure and job pressure and economic pressure, you know what? That's going to go into the kids, and it's really challenging for children. I think it's challenging for parents as well, who maybe are used to their children being at school, so they can both or one of them work in the day. And now with the kids at home the entire time, it's a new dynamic. And I think that stress can impact the parents' health. I think it can impact the children's health. And I actually worry about the long-term implications of this for children, if I'm honest. More than anything, I really worry that they're being taught to have a fear of somebody else, the other person. And I get it that it's complex, and I get that there's all kinds of polarizing views on what people should or shouldn't be doing at this time, right? I do understand that, but I do think there's going to be a consequence of this. And I do feel that in the future, we're going to have some kids who have got almost like a obsession around hand washing for everything, because it's been so ingrained in them that actually when they're a bit older, I think it's going to be hard for some of these kids to let go of that and to be scared of, that's the funny thing about this pandemic is we're being taught to fear the other human, right? And what impact does that have on these kids in 5, 10, 15 years time? But I don't know about. I do worry about it, but I am an optimist at heart. So actually, then I think, we'll be okay. We'll find a way through this, is how I like to think of the future. And if I'm honest on it, it's how I choose to think about the future, because ultimately, nobody knows. I'd rather look on the bright sides than the negative side.
Yeah, I worry about the long-term consequences as well. And, I think first, one comment, learning and education are different things, right? They don't have to be attending this remote school to be learning things. Second, the pressure is real. And I think mental health is at risk, and physical health of children is at risk. I recently wrote an article about lack of movement in children, depression, sleep, when they're home and stressed and don't interact with other kids, and they're pressured to perform with this online learning and Zoom and fatigue and isolation, all of this toxic stress is going to have long-term effects on our children.
Yeah.
I already see the effects on many families. I work with families who are challenged, right? They are challenged with their children's behavior, and this remote learning and pandemic is brought up so many new challenges, and people fight in their households because two parents may have different views on learning, and some expectations might be different. So what I see is this, we're away from people. There is increased fear, increased stress, anxiety, depression. And I think it's a lot difficult for middle schoolers and high schoolers, for whom social interactions and their peers are a priority and, of high importance. And it is going to have long-term mental impact. And I am an optimist, but what I also know is I've been through a severe earthquake when I was 13 in Armenia. And I drew parallels between this pandemic experience and the severe earthquake. There are similarities, but there are also, I think, one striking difference. With this pandemic, we fear other people. With the earthquake, it was the people, it was the social connections, it was the relationships that kept us moving, that we had each other. Although we had nothing, we were dealing with the aftermath of the earthquake for years. But I had my grandma, even though I lost my mom, I had my grandma, I had my uncles and my aunts. So the support was there. And I think that helps with resilience. So with this pandemic, I'm not saying this is going to affect everyone because everybody has a different situation. But what's lacking here is just that, the social aspect, the isolation. And we already knew the mental health was on a rise. We already knew that there was a loneliness epidemic. So for me, I am really worried and concerned.
Yeah.
And I even called it on my podcast, just one more thing, and I want to hear your thoughts. I even said this may even be considered as an adverse childhood experience. And I was like, am I being an alarmist? I want to hear what you think about this.
I think you're spot on. I don't think you've been alarmist at all. I think in the middle of it, as we are now, it's still going on. And obviously, I don't know what the restrictions are where you live compared to where I live. I know they're different in all places. But, the truth is, I am worried, right? I'm really, really worried because it's like you said. I mean, I think it was a really interesting comparison with that earthquake. And I really appreciate you sharing that. Early on in the pandemic, my neighbor, she's 93 or 94. She's in her early 90s. And I asked her, because she lives by herself, and I asked her if she needed any shopping, whether her kids weren't able to come round. And it was really nice to connect with her. And I said, hey, look, is any part of this similar to the Second World War between 1939 and 1945? And she said, like, oh, no, not at all. Then we knew who the enemy was. Now it's totally different. I don't know who I should be scared of or not, who that enemy is. It's invisible. And I think that's what makes this current crisis just so different from other crises. And that's what makes it really hard to predict what's going to happen. I think you made a great point. Depending on the age of the children, I think makes a big difference. So I think my kids are just about young enough where I feel I can shelter them from a lot of the impacts. I'm really paying attention to my own stress and anxiety and really trying hard. I'm really trying hard to make sure I'm aware of how I'm behaving and acting when I'm around them so they don't start to absorb things that are going on for me. I actually think that there's so many examples I could think of. There's someone I bumped into a few months ago, and they were telling me about their 15-year-old son who used to be really happy. He played football every week. He wanted to be a professional footballer. And they said since this started, he can't play football. There's no school. He's been stuck in his room. He's suicidal now. They're so panicked. They said, I've never seen anything like this before. They don't recognize their son, right? And they're like, Dr. Chatterjee, what's happened? And it's, this is just a passing conversation in the street. So it's very, I try and offer support and to listen and give some advice, but that's just one case. In my own personal network, I have known now, this is not just children. In fact, it's adolescents or, actually late teenagers or people in their 20s. I've known of 4 to 6 suicides in my own personal network, not close friends, but just friends of friends of friends. I never heard about this to this level in the past. And I think it fundamentally comes down to who we are as a species. We are social animals. We're wired to be with each other. Humans have done what they've done in the world because we can work together in communities. And, we know this is pre-pandemic. We know the research on loneliness and that some studies suggest that the feeling of being lonely may be as harmful as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. I think that's very hard to quantify for sure, but certainly that it's been talked about in the same vicinity, the same areas, that's worrying. We know people who feel lonely, I think 50% more likely to die earlier, 30% more likely to have a heart attack or a stroke. And you know what? Many people are feeling that isolation at the moment. And again, I think it depends on where you are in life. One of the reasons I feel I've been okay in this pandemic, and I really do feel that I have, I think there's a couple of reasons. A, I'm fortunate because of my job situation. B, I feel I've lived a lot of my life. I've done a lot of therapy over the past year since my dad died. I've really spent a lot of work trying to understand my patterns, my behaviors, why I behave in certain ways, why certain things used to trigger me. And I feel the more of that work you do, the more able you are to, deal with adversity and actually focus on what you can control and focus on what you can't control. And so I think as an adult with that life experience behind me, I feel I've been able to navigate this pretty well. But as a child, that must be so different. I got a message on Instagram yesterday from a second-year university student. So she must be, I'm going to guess, around 19, 20 years old. She goes, no one's talking about students, right? It's just hell. We can't get jobs. All the things that we thought we were going to do, we can't socialize. We can't see our boyfriends or our girlfriends. No one's allowing us to come in for internships. She said, I really wish this had happened to me when I was a young child, not now when I'm sort of 19 or 20. So I think where you are in life also plays a big role. Have you got your life ahead of you? You at that stage in life where you want opportunities, you want to go out and meet people and make your way in the world. Well, that world has not existed for many of us for many, many months now. And so, yeah, I think we need to almost redefine what's important at the moment. If you're a parent, right, and you're thinking about your children, what's important? Is it important? Is it really, really important that your child is up to date with all their studies, right? Or is it important, or is it more important that they feel loved, that they feel supported, that all these rumors and headlines and stress they might be absorbing, that they know, actually, you know what? I can talk about this. I've got someone who cares for me. Because I really feel that it's those things that are going to stand us in good stead going forward. Nobody knows how long these restrictions are going to last, right? And I think it's causing a lot of anxiety for so many people. I mean, the way I describe anxiety to people at the moment, maybe I could share it with your listeners because it's quite useful for people. And that's this idea that there's two parts of our brain. There's our thinking brain and our emotional brain. And from our emotional brain, we generate fear, right? So fear can be a very helpful response. It can be protective, right? So if you walk out into a busy road and a car comes towards you, fear kicks in, you get scared, and it causes you to take aversive action. So you go, man, I need to move out of the way. Next time I cross the road, I'm going to look both ways before I cross. Okay, great. So it has a very, very good role. The problem is when that fear turns into anxiety and when the thinking brain gets involved. So the thinking brain is always trying to predict what is going to happen in the future based on past events. So for all of us at the moment, our brain is trying to go, oh, okay, well, how long is this going to last? What's going to happen based upon what's happened in the future? The problem is very few of us have lived through anything like this. So our brain's trying to make a prediction and it's got nothing to base it on. So for many of us, what actually happens is that fear turns into anxiety. And for many others, that anxiety gets supercharged and becomes panic. So if anyone's listening to this and either they're feeling this or their children are, I just want to send them a message that they're not broken. It's not that there's anything wrong with them. Your brain is trying to protect you. Your brain is trying to do what it has always done. It's just in this uncertain environment, in some of us, it's playing out as anxiety. And so I think it's a nice explanation for people to just get a head round what's actually happening. And, for children, I don't know, as I say, we're having 3 meals a day together each day. We make an effort to switch the laptops off, switch the phones off, sit round together, talk to each other, ask each other how we're feeling. We've got this game that we played for a few years that I call the gratitude game. So my wife, myself, my 2 children, my 10-year-old son and my 8-year-old daughter, we have to go around the table and answer 3 questions. Question 1, what have I done today to make somebody else happy? Question 2, what has somebody else done today to make me happy? Question 3, what have I learned today? And it's such a simple game, but it's so, so powerful. It was powerful pre-pandemic. I find it even more powerful in this time because it really reminds us of the importance of what is truly important. It helps switch our attention away from the negative onto the positive. Even if we've had a bad day, it reminds us, what's the learning today? You know, what lesson can I learn from today? What has life taught me today? And I really feel that I feel that's what's important that I do with my children each day, is to help them reframe the world and help them connect with us. And yeah, I don't know, it's challenging, isn't it? It really is challenging. There's no question.
It is. It is challenging. I have a 13-year-old, almost 13. So it is very difficult for her. She was a very outdoorsy, sports playing child. And now she's in her room and she doesn't see a human being for days, and she doesn't want to come out of her room.
I'm so sorry to hear that. That must be very, very hard as a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And this, it's only so much you can do, I guess, with that, because yes, she I'm sure she wants to see her mother, but at that age, it's probably about your friends and building those networks with the people around you, almost maybe breaking free a little bit from parents and bonding with your tribe, your own tribe that you've curated yourself. And that's really hard. I mean, have you found anything that can help? Do you try and go for walks together or anything like that?
We do, but it's it's a battle, right? Everything is a battle. Everything I know, everything. I even purchased a table tennis and I put it in a garage. I mean, I don't want to turn this into my own therapy session, but it's challenging. It is. And it's like there's nothing you can do. And whatever you do doesn't work, So you're feeling hopeless because that's just the situation and you can't change the situation.
Yeah.
And as a parent, you do, and you feel depleted and drained, and you have to work and you have to cook and you have to help other parents. And it becomes this endless cycle of, seeing people struggle, but not knowing how to help.
Yeah. Your experience is something that many people are feeling as well. I mean, it must be so, so hard. I mean, the advice I've given to some patients of mine or parents who've asked me for help is, first of all, is be kind to ourselves, because it is hard and we can't solve everything at the moment. And we want to be able to for our children, but we can't, and that's very hard to accept. I know I find things like that very, very hard to accept. I want to be able to do everything for my kids, and rather, I know it's not the right thing, but I almost want to eliminate all suffering from them and actually make their lives smooth and stuff. But I know that's not how we grow as humans. And I have that sort of conflict in my head a lot of the time. But, I found with some parents trying to say, listen, maybe if you diary in things that you're going to do together, that, mummy or daddy, I'm really busy with work and I know it's hard for you because you can't be at school. But at 1:00 today, I'm going to shut my laptop, put my phone off, and we can do something together, whatever you want. Is it play a board game? Is it watch a TV show together? Cook something together? I know. And again, you know what? I don't have a 13-year-old daughter, right? That's the truth. Like, I know what I've been taught and what I can say to people, but my experience as a father has been up to the age of 10 now, right? And people tell me that with teenagers, it's different. So I don't want to patronize anyone who's got a different experience to even think that I might know how to handle, a teenager. And I know one of my best friends actually has been really struggling with this. His son, I think it's 13 or 14, and he's been finding it really hard. He's just stuck in his room. He doesn't want to come out. I'm concerned how much time he's spending on his smartphone. I want to go out and do things with him, but he's not interested. So it is very, very hard. I mean, are you making sure that you're spending time yourself to manage your own stress? And at least if you can't change that with your daughter, can you at least make sure you discharge that stress in some way each day?
Yes, for sure. I am a big proponent of that. That's a big part of my work. And that's where my work sort of crosses with yours, the way you talk about stress and health and small manageable things, self-care, all of that. If that wasn't in place, I think it would have been very, very difficult. No question.
Does your daughter like dancing? Does she like dancing?
I think it's at this moment, I want to call it depression. I think they are so depressed, the kids, that even the things that they used to enjoy, they just block. They don't want to hear. They don't want to participate in life anymore.
Yeah.
But I don't want to talk about this and linger on this topic and be a sad podcast conversation. I want to talk about your book, your latest book, which I think is so great and valuable, and it ties in with the emotional health. I think we can connect to some aspects of this. So why did you write this book today, and what is your hope with this new book?
Yes, I Feel Great, Lose Weight. It's my fourth book now. And why did I write it? Mm-hmm. It's a really good question. So my mission is to help 100 million people improve their healths. I want to inspire 100 million people around the world to believe that they can be the architects of their own health, right? That's my lifelong mission. And there's a big story behind where that is and why it's come about. So anything I do is I'm always thinking about, is this going to impact the lives of a lot of people? And the reason I wrote a book on, it's from the title, it's seemingly about weight loss, but it's about much more than weight loss, actually. And, weight loss has become a very divisive topic. It's become very controversial. Certainly here in the UK, it has. And I didn't need to touch this topic. I didn't need to write it, but I felt that I had something to offer here. And I feel that there's a lot of people out there who really, really struggle with their weight and their overall health. And they've been conditioned to think that they have to go on really hard diets or punishing exercise regimes, which sure can work for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, but rarely tend to work for most people in the long term. And I think it can be quite damaging, because what I've noticed happening a lot of the time is that people beat themselves up. It's the only industry, the diet industry, where, the cliche is in January, right? January the 1st, you're like, I'm going to go on my new diets now to lose weight. And yeah, you can follow any diet, frankly, for 2 or 3 weeks and you will lose weight, probably. The question is, what's going to be sustainable for you? What's going to help you thrive? What's going to help you improve your self-esteem, your mental health as well? And unfortunately, in March, what I would see is a lot of people, they lost a bit of weight in January. And then by March, not only have they gone back to where they were, they're even heavier. But that's not the worst thing. The worst thing is they feel like a failure. Their self-esteem has gone down, because it's the only industry where we don't blame the diet, we blame ourselves. And I thought we need a much more compassionate approach to improving our health, particularly around the topic of weight loss. Now, the irony is this book is helping lots of people, whether they need to lose weight or not, because my approach is always about the promotion of health and well-being. Weight loss, if you desire it, comes as a side effect of that. So that's why it's called Feel Great, Lose Weight. I'm going to help people feel great straight away. Small, sustainable things that they can do in their daily lives are going to help them feel good about themselves. And that's going to lead to the side effects of weight loss for those people who want it. For those people who don't want it, it's just going to help them feel healthier. But I wrote it because I really wanted to bring this holistic approach that I stand for to the topic of weight loss. And I don't think it has been. Weight loss is still thought to be around, you need to restrict your diet and you need to exercise and move more. And it really is an incomplete picture. Sleep is very important. We know from research that, let's say you sleep 5.5 hours a night compared to 8 hours a night, you're going to eat on average 22% more calories the next day, right? Just from one poor night's sleep. So 5 days of sleeping 5.5 hours a night, you're going to eat on average a whole extra day's worth of calories, right? Just from not sleeping. And that's because of the hormonal changes that happen with your hunger signals, your satiety signals when you've not slept. You're less able to resist temptation when you've not slept. You're more emotionally volatile and reactive when you've not slept. And so some of my patients, I've helped them regain their health and lose significant amounts of weight. And I didn't touch their diet. I just helped them sleep better. But then there's stress to think about as well. Now, people don't think about stress enough when it comes to weight loss, and they should do, because this pandemic is really showing that to us. So I don't know where you live, how it is, but certainly in the UK, there's a lot of talk about people having put on weight during the pandemic. There's all kinds of terms that the media use, the quarantine 15, the corona stone, right?
Yeah.
And people are beating themselves up and think, I need to get on a new diet and I need to sort this out. And let's look at what the research says. The research suggests that about 45% of us eat more in response to stress, right? So that's nearly half the population. If we're eating more in response to stress, we don't need a new diet. We need better help managing stress. And so I kind of feel we're looking for solutions in the wrong places. And so why I wrote this book is to help people understand that you can regain your health, you can lose weight if that's what you want to do, but you can do it in a way that's kind to yourself. You can do it in a way that's compassionate to yourself. And you can always help somebody improve their health and well-being and help them lose weight in a way that's responsible and sustainable once you help them find the right approach for them. And what I really believe my book does is I help every single reader identify what is the right approach for me. Is it stress and sleep that I need to focus on? Is it the foods that I'm eating? Is it how I'm eating? Right? We know that if we eat distracted, as many of us do, and I do occasionally, I'm not preaching, I know I shouldn't, but I'm as guilty as anyone sometimes of falling into these habits where you're eating your healthy lunch whilst also doing your emails, right? Well, we know if you eat whilst distracted, you eat more at that meal and you eat more at subsequent meals. So for some of my patients, I've helped them regain their health and lose weight by helping them eat more mindfully. And there's quite a lot of tips in the book to help people understand how they might want to do that. So, I'm really proud of it. As I said, I didn't need to go into that area, right? I did it because I really feel there's a lot of people out there who are being misserved by the societal narrative. And I wanted to show people that, there is another way to do this, right? There is another way to look at your health. And, emotions are a big part of it. There's my favorite section in the book. The book's split up into what you eat, why you eat, how you eat, where you eat, and when you eat, which I thought was a very novel way to look at this.
I really love, just 2 words, I really love how you organize the book. I really love that it's a colorful book because it makes you want to engage with it. You want to hold it, look at it. I am tired of black and white books, nonfiction books that are, they give you tips and practices, but you don't want to engage with it. I'm turned off. I'm a visual person. I really love that this is colorful and there are photographs and just, it's so fun and engaging. I really love that and how you structured it. And it's so simple. It flows together. That's what I love about your approach and your books. You distill it to simple, actionable steps, digestible, and it's doable. It gives you that confidence that I can do it, makes it accessible for everyone. That's what I love. And your holistic approach to health and well-being and life. I think, that's how I approach parenting too, from a holistic approach, not like, oh, my child is not listening. Can you help me with that? I look at sleep. I look at their I look at everything. And people are like, well, I came here with this behavior challenge. How come you're looking, at our life, at our relationship, at our everything? Because it's a, it's a holistic approach. You can't just take one little symptom and work on it, fix it, because it's a part of this system, right? And so that's what I resonate with your work, with your approach so much. It's just, So talk about the book, how you structured it, and I'm sure you have to think about this stuff like a lot to distill and simplify to that degree.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
First of all, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you like it, and the design, and we spend a long time trying to think about the design, how to bring these ideas to life. And so, just to back up a second, I've had to do a lot of thinking about why I write books. I remember when I was first writing my first book, which was called The Four-Pillar Plan in the UK and How to Make Disease Disappear in the United States. I remember starting to write it. And when I was writing it, I was thinking, I want doctors to like this. I've got to put lots of science in and studies. And then 2 weeks in, I just asked myself, Rangan, why are you writing this book? If you're writing this to help people, right? Write it to help them. Write it not to show off how much you know. Write it to make things practical and inspirational and actionable for them to fit into their lives. And so I threw out what I'd done. I started again. I thought, right, I'm going to have that avatar of the reader in my head and keep them in mind throughout this whole process. And it was a real lesson in my own ego, because your ego wants to show off how much you know. Right? Especially as a doctor, you want to be taken seriously and have that credibility. But I've really learned over the last years, I don't need to do that. I'm not here to prove how much I know to anyone, right? I teach and educate doctors. If people want that level of knowledge and education, great, I can give it to you. But in the books, and I think in this newest book, I'm really proud of how I managed to distill down. It was a lot longer. There was more detail in it. And I thought, is this helpful? Is this going to really help somebody, number one, understand it, and number two, do anything about it? And if the answer was no, cut. And it is really hard actually to make something simple. And people who are in the industry sort of know that it's easy for me to write a book that's double the length and just keep going on and putting more studies in and more science in. And you know what? There's some great books out there like that. I like reading some of those books, but that's not what I want to offer people in my books. I think what is the best science and the most relevant science, and I make sure that when doing it, that it adds to the narrative, it adds to the story that I'm trying to tell someone. And, the nicest feedback I get from people is, actually, I couldn't put it down. It was really fun to read. And I think, great, why can't a health book be fun? Why can't it be an enjoyable reading experience where there's a pace to it and there's storytelling? And so, I think long and hard, I'd written half of the book before I'd come up with that what, why, how, when, and where. I had these 8 different chapters. And I just wasn't happy. I thought, come on, there's got to be another way to bring this to life, to really engage people. And I was actually sitting in this room, maybe last March or April, and it suddenly came to me, what, why, how, when, where. And I suddenly started writing on paper. I thought, I can put that in that bit and that in that bit. And this is a really fresh and novel way for people to look at it. And so, it takes a lot of work. Having a book that's designed, it almost doubles the workload, because even when you finish the manuscript, then actually you've got to speak to the designers. And then you have to often break up the manuscripts, go, well, that won't work with the design. So you then have to rewrite things and go, well, I'm going to keep that as narrative. And that's going to be a real sort of action box for people so they can actually easily pull that out. And so, I really appreciate that you can see that, because to make something really simple, I think it's the hardest thing to do, actually. And you really need to understand the topic to be able to simplify it. And I don't think I quite understood how difficult it was until I've actually gone and done it. And I really think in my last two books, Feel Better in 5 and Feel Great, Lose Weight, I really feel I managed to simplify health and distill it down. So yeah, I know it's been out in the UK for, what are we on now? 6 weeks, and people are loving it, and they're really finding that it's helping them improve physical health, mental health. So many people saying they feel like they're losing weight and they're not even trying. And that's my goal, is to say, listen, I'm going to help you improve the quality of your life. The side effect's going to be that you're going to start losing weight, but you don't need to focus on it.
Yeah, because weight loss is very stigmatized, right? I think you're taking that stigma away and it comes as a side effect and it's kind of effortless. I like that. Let's talk about some of the practical things in the book. You know, you're a very practical guy, action tips and tools. I love that. I want you to share some of the things with my listener. Let's talk about the emotional eating, particularly. I love the exercise, the 3 Fs. I'm wondering if you can share here too. That's a great one.
Yeah, it's my favorite one, and I think I've referenced it during the book at least 10 times, because
so you practice it too?
I practice it, and I think it's the most important exercise in the book. Honestly, I really do. It's we talk about emotional eating. Okay, so the best way I can describe it and how I put it in the book is, we used to eat to fill a hole in our stomachs. Now we eat to fill a hole in our hearts. When we're lonely, we eat. When we're bored, we eat. When we're stressed out, we eat. When we've been on Zoom calls all day, we've not had time to get outside and move, we eat, right? And that's okay. But we need to understand that all behaviors serve a role, all of them. And too often we don't want to understand what role they serve. We just want to go to the solution. Oh, I'm eating too many biscuits or crisps on the sofa in the evening. I need to go on a new diet where I just stop. Great, you can do that for a few weeks, but it's unlikely to help you beyond that unless you understand what's going on. So the 3F exercise, we can talk about it with relation to food, but it works for anything. It works for alcohol. It works for spending too much time on Instagram. You know, you can apply it to any aspects of your life. So the 3Fs are feel, feed, and find. So let's talk about it in relation to food, right? So somebody's listening to this now, and they're sitting on their sofa, 8:30 in the evening, in front of the television or in front of YouTube or something, and they feel like snacking on, you know, some biscuits or some cakes or some ice cream, right? Many people have that craving in the evening, particularly in these stressful times. It's almost like a little reward to ourselves at that time. I'm saying just take a quick pause, either write this down or just have a think. The first F is feel. What are you really feeling? Are you really hungry for food, or are you hungry for something else? Are you bored? Has the children's bedtime gone on too long and you're feeling a bit anxious, so you just want to treat yourself a little bit? Have you had a bad day at work? Have you had a row with your partner and this is your way of feeling a little better? Whatever it is, just take a moment to acknowledge it and then go ahead and eat it. No problem. Next time, you can go through that process and move to the second F. The second F is feed. Now that you know what the emotion is, okay, how does food feed that feeling? So the second F is feed. How does food feed that feeling? When I'm super stressed and I have ice cream, I feel better for 20 minutes. So the food helps you feel less stressed. Okay, great. Go ahead and have it. But now you're just starting to join the dots together. You're starting to understand your behavior. You're bringing in awareness. And without awareness, there is never any long-term change. And then the third F is, now that you know the feeling, now that you know how your chosen snack feeds that feeling, the third F is find. Can you find a non-food behavior to feed that same feeling? So if it's that you use ice cream because you're stressed, well, maybe you can run yourself a bath and nourish yourself. Maybe you can do a 5 or 10-minute yoga flow from YouTube. Maybe you can go for a walk around the block if you're living somewhere where it's light at that time and you can do that. Maybe, you know what? You've got a partner, but you've been so busy, you've not spent any quality time together. So maybe you can give your partner a cuddle. Maybe you can hug your pet. Maybe you need to change the room. Maybe, the brain is an associative organ. So we're used to doing certain behaviors in certain places. Maybe you go to a different room if that's an option for you. But it's so powerful. I've been using this exercise for years with patients. And as I say, in just the last 6 weeks of this book coming out, I'm getting messages every day on social media from people saying that this exercise is really helping them understand what is truly going on. And so, yeah, a very simple exercise, but one I think that's going to help a lot of people really understand what's driving their behaviors.
Yes. I was wondering, you mentioned touch, cuddling with your pets and your partner. And I know you have things to say about touch. I would love it if you could share here the importance of touch, the types of touch, and how touch starved we are during this pandemic, right? And how it's perhaps impacting our overall health.
Yeah, I'm super passionate about touch. In the stress solution, I wrote a whole chapter just on touch and how important it is. We don't think about it. It's the kind of, it's probably the most undervalued of the senses. It's about, if we talk about what sense we'd like to lose, it'd be like, we don't want to lose our vision. We don't want to lose our hearing, right? And again, I don't want to lose any of my senses, but touch doesn't really get a look in. But when you look at the science of touch, right? If you are stroking someone like this, I mean, if people can see this, I don't know if they can just hear it. And actually, there is a rate. That's ridiculous. I'll tell you what the rate is. It's 3 to 5 centimeters a second. Now, that sounds ridiculous, but I'll explain to you what's going on, right? So we are a touch-starved society. We actually were before the pandemic as well. It's probably got a lot worse now. Now, they've done research on this, that when you stroke somebody's skin at the speed of 3 to 5 centimeters per second, which is actually the rate that a mother would stroke their baby, right? So it's within us. We don't need to measure it. It's what we naturally do as humans. You activate a type of receptor in the body called the C-tactile afferents. Now, you don't need to know the name, but those receptors go up to a primitive part of your brain, and it helps to lower the stress hormone cortisol, right? So literally, the act of touching changes our biology. Yes, it affects cortisol, that affects oxytocin, and this is very, very powerful for our overall health and well-being. And so I remember when I was filming a BBC documentary on this a few years ago, and I was in the lab in Liverpool John Moores University with Professor Francis McGlone, who's one of the world's leading researchers in this area. And as he was telling me that, and my son was 7 years old at the time, the penny dropped for me. I thought, wow, every night when I put him to bed, he says, Daddy, can you stroke me? And sometimes, like many busy parents, I'd be like, oh, okay, sure. In your head, you stroke a little bit, but then you think, I've got stuff to do. I want to get on. But when I heard that from Professor McGlone, I thought, wait a minute. He's crying out for this feeling to help lower things, to change his biology because how it makes him feel. And I tell you, since that day, when he asks me, I very rarely say no. I just think, Rangan, is what you've got to do more important than giving your son that sense of well-being and calm and love? And so I will sometimes be for 10, 15 minutes, I'll be stroking him here or on his back, while he falls asleep. I'll do the same with my daughter. And yes, it takes time. It does take time. And sure, could I be doing something else in that time? Yeah. But actually, once I knew that science and once I knew what value it was providing for the children, I thought, I really should be doing this and I want to do this. And then circling back to what we said at the start of this conversation about humans being social animals, what's really interesting is those receptors on our body for those C-tactile afferent nerves. Do you know where most of them are?
What?
On our upper back and our shoulders.
Oh.
Why would they be there? The reason they're there is because, it's quite hard for us to access that ourselves. Why would evolution put such an important receptor on our back? Because it's about bringing us together with other people. Someone else in our tribe is to be doing that for us. And if you really delve into the science, it's not only the receiver of that touch that gets a benefit, the touch giver also gets the benefit. And we know for those people who are listening who've got pets, actually, you can get similar benefits by stroking your pets. And it makes me think about what you were saying before on about your daughter. And I appreciate you don't want to go into that. But it just made me think about, well, maybe a different way to access our children is if we can, I don't know, cuddle them, stroke them, maybe sit on the sofa and watch something together. And whilst we're doing it, put our arm around the upper back and shoulder where these receptors are. Maybe there's another way to change their biology and change how they feel without directly having to talk to them and say, well, I want to do this with you. I don't want you in your room all the time. Maybe we can get we can get the response that we're after by approaching it in a slightly different way. And, I'm just thinking this through as I talk to you. I haven't really thought that through before, but I think that could be incredibly helpful for some people.
I think so too. I think it's just brilliant. And, a lot of people tend to reason things, right? Solve problems, fix problems. We're always in our thinking brain, but most of the helpful stuff is just nonverbal. It's listening. It's being empathetic. It's touch. All of those things that are not rooted in your reasoning, right? It's relating. It's regulating each other's nervous systems. That's what's important. And I completely agree. And this is such a brilliant point. And I just learned that about the receptors being in the back. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. And the more you look into this, the more you realize that this is the fundamental problem within the pandemic. I think for most people, I appreciate there is the acute issue that people are trying to deal with and come up with guidelines on. I get that. I don't feel I'm an expert on that area, so I don't really feel I've got much to comment and contribute to that. What I can talk about is the impact of humans being locked away from each other and told not to be with each other. And touch is one of them. Another thing I think is just worth mentioning, and it may help our teenage children as well, but it can also help us as adults, is that connecting with another human being is not necessarily about being physically in the same space, right? We learned a lot of this from Professor John Capiosho, who unfortunately died a few years ago. He was probably the world's leading researcher in human connection. And he said that human connection is about a shared experience. You can be in the middle of Times Square surrounded by thousands of people back in the day and feel lonely, right? Because it's not just about physically being there, it's about shared experience. And I feel that something I talk to a lot of people about these days is, yes, vulnerability, but also maskless conversations, right? We have to wear masks all the time in our lives. You have to wear a mask to be on a podcast. We have to wear a mask in our job as a parent. We might have to wear a certain mask in our job role. But when can we take all the masks off? When can we actually truly be ourselves? Who are those people? I've got about, I think, 6, 7 people, I think, in my life, I feel, certainly friend-wise, who I feel I can say anything to them without fear of being judged or spoken down to. And I think we can often be so busy and stressed out with the way of the world that even if we have those connections, we're not nourishing them. And as I was thinking about this over the last few months, I've started calling my friends more, like even just 5 minutes. I'm no longer texting them, say, hey, can we talk at this time? Are you free then? I thought, how bizarre we got to the state in the world where now we don't even call anyone out of the blue. We're scared of intruding on their time, that we text and schedule it. And I'm as guilty of this as anyone else. I thought, you know what? These really good friends of mine, I'm just going to call them. If they can't answer, they can't answer. If they answer and say they're busy, they're busy. And you know what? My wife said to me last week, actually, I came into the kitchen just before dinner. She goes, well, why are you sort of skipping around and got a big smile on your face? I just spoke to Steve, and Steve's like one of my best mates from university. I lived with him for 5 years at medical school. And I've not really spoken to him that much recently. And we just spoke for 5 minutes, and we just had a complete blast. And it totally changed how I felt about the day. So again, another tip for people is think about who can you have those masters conversations with. And if you haven't nourished that connection, maybe think about this week giving them a call, even if you have to schedule it in. And I think potentially that's something to help our children with is, we've tried to do that with our kids. I know they're a bit younger, is their friends. We've arranged phone calls or, a Zoom, as much as I'm not a fan of Zooms. Do you know what I mean? So I think connection is about, there's multiple facets to connection. And just because we can't be with people, we can still try and approach connection in different ways as well.
One of the podcast guests recently, whom I interviewed, said, we have all turned into zombies. I thought that was quite a funny term. He said, is it okay to say on your podcast that we are zombies? I said, yeah, sure, go ahead. Let's popularize that term.
It's funny you say that, actually, because you know what I've been thinking about? I've been thinking about what's the hierarchy of social connection? If we say that face-to-face, I don't think anyone would argue that face-to-face in the same room is the best.
Yeah, for sure.
You get all these non-verbal cues, you get the energy, you can really pick up on these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can touch, you can, it's completely different.
So that's number one. And then I think most people would assume that next would actually be some sort of video conferencing like we're doing at the moment, because I can see you, so I get a bit of body language. But actually, I don't think it is. And I've been trying to write as to why it's different. I'm playing around with a few ideas at the moment. But I think a phone call is the next best thing, because there's a certain intimacy with a phone call. And I don't know what it is, whether this is just a foreign way of looking at a computer screen, whether we miss something, whether it's weird seeing ourselves back in the screen, because normally when we're talking to someone, you don't see yourself back.
I know.
And I feel that can make some people feel self-conscious. I've seen this in a few work meetings. People aren't aware of it. But I think particularly for certain women, and I think because there's been such a pressure on women in society about how you look, and you often see people, but men as well, playing around with their faces in calls because they obviously can see themselves. And I actually think there's something about the good old-fashioned phone call that is, I think that's really, really intimate. And I think it's better than video conferencing, actually.
There is a study, actually. I can't recall the exact study. I'm an audio person, for sure, and for multiple reasons. I think that's why I went into podcasting. Since I was a kid, I wanted to work on a radio. I did have an internship at the Voice of America in Washington, D.C. I was always drawn to audio. It was part of growing up, right? Radio was very popular. I think when I conduct most of my interviews before the pandemic, audio only. Why? Because I listen attuned with my entire body, with all of the cells of my body. I'm more attuned and careful not to miss any little small change in the voice, in the intonation. And I'm a better listener, and I ask a lot deeper questions. Video for me is destructive. I'm watching, interpreting the expressions of the face, the gestures, assuming things. It's a lot more distraction when it's done through video. When in real life, that's helpful because it gives you more meaning into the context of interaction. I think there is a difference in communication through video and real life, how we interpret facial expressions. And like you said, with this Zoom, we see ourselves, right? There's this British comedian, Michael McIntyre. He makes a funny joke about this, about FaceTime calls. He says, all we do is we look at our face in the FaceTime call. He says, why don't we just dial on a landline and look in a mirror the whole time? That's FaceTime call, right? Because we're constantly looking at ourselves, not to the other person. For sure, it changes. And there was an interesting study. I have to find this. There was two groups of people. One I think, three groups of people. One were exposed to audio only. They were listening and interpreting emotions. The other was video only, not hearing the audio, just trying to understand what's happening on the screen. And the third group was video and audio. They had to interpret what was going on. And who picked up more of a meaning, nuanced things? It was the audio only group. I can't remember this exact study, and I'm not sure if I'm giving you the synopsis correctly, but that was my takeaway, that audio was the best, interpreting emotions, attitudes, meaning, and that kind of stuff in communication.
So fascinating, really, really fascinating. Something I've become more and more aware of this during this pandemic, about what are those preferred methods of communication. And I'm moving away from Zooms, if I'm honest. I really feel there's something very powerful about a good old-fashioned phone call, particularly if you can resist the temptation to look at Instagram or email at the same time, because you have to just be attentive and listen and pick up on things. So yeah, I think we're both giving a shout out to old-fashioned phone calls.
And I think this is an element for me too. When I'm on an audio call, first of all, I can talk and walk in nature. When I'm on a phone call, and sort of you lose yourself, you talk, you're more engaged and it's deeper. And maybe that, the default network is activated in your brain while you're doing this. It's a lot more relaxing than the Zoom. Zoom is more taxing for me. That takes a lot out of you because you have to sit there, you have to focus. The screen is exhausting. You don't lose yourself in an engaged way, in a way you would on a walk on an audio call with someone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, why is this so important? It's important because when we haven't connected with other people, we will compensate for that in other behaviors. So if we're feeling a lack of connection with people in our lives, we might end up spending 2 hours on Instagram in the evening to substitute for that. That's what I call junk connection as opposed to real connection. And again, I'm not criticizing people for doing that. What I'm trying to help people do is understand their behavior. Go, instead of beating yourself up going, why can't I resist spending 2 hours on Instagram every evening? Well, let's try and unpick it a little bit. Maybe use the 3 Fs.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, well, why am I doing it? What role is that playing and serving in my life? And sometimes, you know what? Instead of going on Instagram, call up one of your friends, call up your mother, call up a work colleague, call someone. And you'll find that the same time investment will lead to a much bigger reward, I think, in how you feel about yourself and how you feel about life in the wider world.
Yeah. Is it draining or nourishing? I think that's the question here. If it's just draining from your energy reservoir and your attention and your time, then you're going to feel depleted in the end. But if it's nourishing, it's life-giving, life-affirming, right? Then go ahead and engage, even if it's Instagram, right? Because sometimes you can use Instagram for those purposes to gain something positive. I got rid of Instagram in October because it was getting too much for me. And I want to live this year not screen free, social media free. I declared 2021. I mean, I still go on Facebook and all of that, but I haven't touched Instagram. And honestly, I haven't noticed the change in my life whatsoever. It doesn't contribute in any way. Yes, I gain listeners, people learn about the podcast and that kind of stuff. But you know what? People will listen to the podcast. They will find it. It's like, I'm okay with that. And I don't want to see the same type of posts. And I had curated my feed, right? Because I want to engage with a certain kind of information and content. And it's the same. People post the same type of things. And I'm like, you know what? The pandemic sameness is enough. Goodbye, Instagram, for now. And it's been great. I don't miss it. And I'm not sure if I want to go back on it. But it was through Instagram that I have found you, right? So there is that benefit.
But look, there are pros and cons, right? But sometimes we forget about the cons and we only think about the pros. So we think, yeah, but then I'm going to miss out on this information or finding that health influencer or that person. Okay, great. Make that in your pros list, but then also look at the cons as well and look at what you're giving up to do that. And I think the thing about technology, and in particular smartphones, that I think we're oblivious to or choose to ignore is I don't think another human being can compete with a smartphone. So that smartphone has on it your whole browsing history. It's got every post you've ever liked on Instagram. All these platforms are looking at how long your eyes are staying on a post. They're measuring all of it to determine what should we feed you more of. And the point is, if you're in a relationship with someone else, your partner can't compete, right? You cannot compete with this highly curated feed of videos and podcasts and things. You've got your own personalized, curated world. And I think it's damaging relationships. Nor do I think, I know it's damaging relationships. Again, in the stress solution, I wrote this chapter on how we're all having the eye affair with our phones. You know, if you're having a relationship, it's the third person in a relationship. And we all know that feeling when it's either us doing it or we're on the other end, we're trying to talk to someone and they're kind of talking to us, but they're sort of also looking at their phone at the same time. It's incredibly distracting. It's very hard to be vulnerable and maskless if that's going on. You know, as humans, we have a need to be heard, to be seen. You can't do that if you've been distracted by a phone. So my wife and I, we have some sort of quite strict rules that we try and implement around our phones to make sure that we're nourishing each other with quality time. When it comes to parents, I tell you, one of my top things that I do with my kids, and I've written about this before, and I say, listen, I think the quality of the time you spend with them is more important than the quantity. Right? Now, some people may disagree with me, and I'm happy to have a conversation about that if people want to. But I feel if I have a busy work day, but if I can spend 10, 20 minutes, even half an hour of dedicated time with them, where I'm with them, I'm not sort of half looking at my phone or half thinking about work, where I've switched off, I find that has such value for them and for me that if I spend an hour with them while I'm also kind of working at the same time, and I really feel it's that quality of intentional connection, whether it's with your partner, with a friend, and with your children, that can really make all the difference.
Yeah, it's kind of like watered down connection you're giving to them, right? Diluted kind of connection. And it's not quality connection.
Yeah.
You know,
and we all do it, right? If someone parent is listening to this, please don't feel bad about it, right? The last thing I want to do is for people to feel bad. I do that sometimes. Some days I'm distracted with my kids, and it's just these days I'm a lot kinder to myself than I used to be. I don't beat myself up. I go, you know what? Life is tough. You know what? You didn't manage to do everything you wanted to do today. That's okay. Tomorrow, I'm going to try harder, and I'm going to hopefully make up for it tomorrow. And I think the language we use, it's always been important right now when we are facing stress. You know, I talk about these stress thresholds that we've all got. And the further away we can be from our stress threshold, the more resilient we are. Problems happen when we reach that stress threshold. And we think it's the last thing that pushed us there that was the problem. But it wasn't. It was all these what I call micro stress doses that are built up that we think it's the last thing, but it wasn't. It was the whole barrage of them that you've been putting up with. And I think all of us these days are just existing. Our baseline is a lot closer to that threshold. We don't have that resilience and that reserve because we're kind of feeling frustrated with the state of the world and how we're being asked to live. So I think we're blowing up more with the people close to us. We're reacting more. We're getting more emotional. We're getting more anxiety. And so simple things that you can do each day, bit of me time, a quick 5-minute workout, a 10-minute walk around the block. These things seem small and trivial, but it's these small things that really do help build up our self-esteem. And it's these small things that really do make a big, big difference.
I had created the stress dial. All my clients, my followers, listeners know about this, right? The normal stress, the threshold, and the burnout that we all have. And you talk about micro stress. I talk about stress container, that, everybody has their own stress container. And when it gets filled, you cross the threshold and you go from the yellow orange zone into the red zone, and you're about to hit this burnout, right? And then you have to dial back. Instead of pushing through, you have to dial back into the green zone by doing de-stressing things and those self-care things and those small things that can empty some of the stuff from your stress container. So this is my language of speaking about stress. What are some things you want to leave the listener with before we say goodbye? As you say that on your podcast, give us three small, you have given so many things already, three small things that people can do to make their lives easier, feel better.
Yeah. 3 tips. I'd probably go with 3 of the habits in the new book, actually. I think it's as good a place as any. Lift, connect, reflect. So lift, right? It's one of my favorite tips. I'll modify it for the state of the world at the moment. So if you have a dumbbell or a kettlebell at home, and many people do, certainly in the UK, in March 2020, in the first lockdown, they sold out of every single shop, including Amazon. So many people have got them kicking around. And if you don't, use a bottle of olive oil or a bottle of water, right? I say leave that weight in your kitchen, okay? And every time you go in your kitchen, or every time let's say in the UK at the moment, it's cold, it's dark, it's winter. Most people are putting on their kettle 3 times a day to make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, okay? Every time you go in, pick it up and do 5 bicep curls on each arm, right? It's nothing. It will feel like nothing. But the beauty is, if you make 3 cups of tea in the day, you'll lift the weight 30 times in a day. That will be over 200 times a week. That's going to be nearly 1,000 times a month. And in the moment, it will feel like you're not doing anything. Right? So it's really simple. And what's so beautiful about it is that it helps build your self-esteem up. It helps you with your physical health, your mental health, and it leads to what I call the ripple effect. It's going to ripple into other aspects of your life where you're going to actually want to make other changes, because often it's that first thing that's so hard to do. So tip number 1, lift something every day. Tip number 2, connect with another human being in some way every day, even if just for a few minutes. Often when we are not connecting and we've got a hole in our hearts, we seek to fill that hole with food, right? So maybe it's not the diet that's the problem. Maybe it's the hole in your heart that you're filling with food. I say, let's fill that hole in our hearts with real human connection. And the third tip is it's to do with reflection. And it's an exercise in the new book, but it's written around health and the side effects of weight loss, but frankly, it works for all of us no matter what we want to achieve. Reflection is a key part of growth. And I say to people, ask yourself 2 questions every evening. What went well today? And what can I change going forward tomorrow? Very simple, but it's like that 3F exercise. It helps you to start building that awareness of what's really going on and starting to live more intentionally and go, you know what? Yeah, that's why I snapped at my children today. I didn't sleep well last night. Work was busy. And you know what? I just snapped at them. I really wish I hadn't, but I get it. Tonight, instead of staying up till midnight watching Netflix, I'll go to bed at 11, get a bit more sleep, then I'll be a bit more resilient tomorrow so I won't snap at my kids. Or whatever the example may be. So my top 3 tips are lift, connect, reflect.
If you were to go back in time, what would you say to yourself as a new parent?
If I went back in time, I think it's a couple of things I'd say. I'd say, you know what, take the pressure off yourself, buddy. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get everything right. Everyone gets some things wrong, but just be open to learning. I think I used to beat myself up about being the perfect parent. I wanted everything to go right. And I know we've not gone into this today, but when my son got really sick when he was 6 months old, and he nearly died. And if people want that story, they can just look at my TED talk where I talk about what happened. But the guilt I felt after that impacted my parenting for years. I really felt guilty over what had happened to him, even though it was not my fault at all. But I really put a lot of pressure on myself, and that guilt led me to try and make everything perfect for him. And it didn't help me. It didn't help him. It certainly didn't help me. And over the last few years, as I've done more work on myself and more therapy, I've let go of that guilt. Have I let go of all of it? I'd like to think so. There's probably still a little bit there, but I'm working on letting it go because he doesn't need a guilty dad. He needs a dad who, is imperfect and who can recognize when he hasn't done things the best he could, or that we all make mistakes. So tip number one, I'd say, take the pressure off yourself. You don't have to be perfect. Tip number two, I'd say to my old self is, you know what? If you get something wrong, it's all right to tell your kids to say, hey, you know what? Daddy was a little bit stressed today. I'm sorry I snapped at you before. These are the reasons why I shouldn't have done it, but I hope you understand. And it's something I've started doing in the last few years, and kids love it. They really get it. And I think it really helps them understand and put a story together that, you know what? Everyone's perfectly imperfect. We don't always get things right. And so owning up to that in front of your children, I think is really powerful. And the final tip, the biggest thing I've learned in my 10 years of parenting is this. Kids don't do what you tell them to do. They do what they see you doing. You want to change something in your children, change it in yourself first, and then the rest follows.
Yeah, truth. Hashtag truth. Well, thank you so much, Rangan. This was an enormous honor, pleasure. And I mean, I love listening to you. I can listen to you for hours, and I do. Your podcast is a big part of my life. I've listened to your interviews on other people's podcasts. So I'm a true fan. And I just want to say thank you. Be safe, be well, a warm virtual hug to you. And I hope I'll get to meet you in real life one day when the pandemic is over, either here in the States or in the UK or, somewhere else in the world. Thank you so much for everything that you do and just for being here and sharing your presence, your time, and your wisdom. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me onto your show. Thanks for the kind words about my work and my podcast. And I also hope we get the chance to meet in person at some point in the future. Take care.